Hi, today we're going to be making rolled biscuits. I'm going to do a little video tutorial on how to do it. I think it's just a little bit easier if you watch the tutorial, so we'll get started, okay? So first of all, let's read the recipe. 2 cups all-purpose flour. Pretty straightforward. 4 teaspoons baking powder. So make sure we're using baking powder, not baking soda. Remember, there is a big difference between the two. This one has an acid in it. The powder has the acid. Baking soda does not have the acid. 2 tablespoons sugar, 1 teaspoon salt, half cup of butter or half cup of margarine, cold. Mine are in the fridge right now because it needs to be cold. 3/4 cup of milk, cold. Let's go through the recipe. Preheat oven to 425 degrees. Mix first 4 ingredients together in a bowl. Cut in butter with a pastry blender or fork or 2 knives until crumbly. Add milk. Stir until forms a ball. Add a bit more milk if necessary to make a soft dough. Roll or pat to 1 inch thick. I usually pat the dough. Cut into circles with biscuit cutter or floured glass. Arrange on a greased baking sheet. Bake in 425-degree oven for 10 to 12 minutes until risen and nicely browned. It may usually take 15 minutes. Alright, so let's get started with the first part of the recipe. Preheat the oven to 425 degrees. I have already preheated my oven. I've also washed my hands and my hair is back and I have I'm good to go for cooking. Mix the first 4 ingredients in a bowl. So, 2 cups flour, 4 teaspoons baking powder, 2 tablespoons sugar, 1 teaspoon of salt. Let's get started with that. My 1 cup. Now, I'm going to be spooning my flour into my cup so that it does not get packed in. That way it's nice and fluffy. I'm going to take a straight edge of this knife, go back and forth. That's 1. Need 2.
That go on and on forever. Broad searches means probably a lot more information than you want, and you're just trying to find too big. Honestly, we're not doing deep research here, it's just too big to So when you're searching,
Well, that's my oven preheated. Now, I preheated it before the video started, so yours might take a little bit longer to preheat. Alright, that's my 2 cups of flour. Now I need 4 teaspoons of baking powder. Now, remember, this is baking soda. It's sodium bicarbonate. It has no acid in it. It needs an acid for it to have a chemical reaction. Baking powder has a dry acid already in it, so all it's going to need, look, it's a brand new thing, all it's going to need is a little bit of liquid to get this to go. Alright, so I need 4 teaspoons. Alright, the nice thing is that it has this nice flash edge here, so when I measure, I can just go like that. 1, 2, 3, 4 teaspoons. Okay, now I need 2 tablespoons of sugar. tablespoon sugar. Need 2 of them. 1, 2. Now I need 1 teaspoon of salt. I can use my teaspoon again. It has a little bit of baking powder on it, but that's okay. I'm going to measure it over a second bowl because I don't want to get everything in there. So if I had measured it over this, it would have gotten salt all in there and it would not have been an accurate measurement. There you go. That's all of my dry. Now if I wanted to, I can kind of mix it up a little bit. That way all my dry is incorporated. Alright, that's my first step. Preheat my oven. Done. Mix first 4 ingredients together in a bowl. Done. I'm going to kind of clear off my spot here a little bit. Alright, second step. Cut in butter with a pastry blender or fork or 2 knives until crumbly. I'm going to put my milk to the side. This is my butter. How much butter do I need? I need 1/3 of a cup. Now how do I know? Well, this is 1/2 of a cup. So right here, you can see the measurements are right on there, right? These are the tablespoons. This would be 1/4 of a cup. This is 1/3 of a cup. It's right on the thing. So what's beautiful is I can go right through the paper and cut it right there. Alright? Now, I'm going to chop this into smaller pieces. The butter needs to be cold. And the reason the butter needs to be cold is because it needs to stay as little chunks of butter. If it melts, then it won't make the biscuits flaky. What's going to make biscuits flaky is the butter. Melted butter will not make flaky biscuits. So I'm just chopping this into smaller pieces, so when I'm using my pastry blender, it's easier to do. Putting my butter right here in the flour. I'm going to be using a pastry blender. This is a pastry blender. It's not sharp here, okay? This is a pastry blender. This is a pastry blender. Now, a lot of you are looking at me like, I don't have one of these at home. You can use 2 butter knives, just chopping it up. You can use a fork and using it just like this. You're going to be cutting in with your pastry blender. What is to cut in? This is to cut in. Right now I'm cutting in. So I'm chopping these pieces of butter into small pieces.
So, in the continued notes, and in the first part of the notes, a feature is going to be anything that has a number in front of it, and then a term. So, 1 feature of civilizations, number 7, cities and armies. 1 feature of civilizations, number 8, it's got the number, art and literature. So, for example, if you can find the date for an Egyptian poem, of which there are many, you could
Okay. So you can see that there's really small chunks of, that's the butter. It's in really small chunks, okay? So when the butter's in these super small chunks, it'll be throughout the mixture. Kind of hard to get it out of these slits. I just use a butter knife. Okay. So we're done here. You have little chunks of butter all in there. Now I need my milk. Again, the milk needs to be cold because we don't want to melt the butter. I'm going to put this butter back. I need 3/4 of a cup of milk. So I'm going to go down here.
As features of civilization, 12 features of civilization. So you are being asked to do something similar that you do in your issues, which is match the feature.
Put my milk back in my fridge. 3/4. It's kind of moving around, but you can see right there, 3/4. I'm going to pour it in there. Then we're going to mix it up. I'm going to just clear my workspace here a little bit.
So long story short, 100 notes, 2 assignments. One of those assignments is going to be tonight.
Alright, add milk, did that, stir until it forms a ball. So I'm going to stir this up until it forms a ball. I'm using a rubber scraper. You don't want to use a whisk. A whisk, this will be too thick. It's going to be more like a dough and it's going to get all stuck inside of here. You're only using a whisk if you're incorporating air. Okay, do not use a whisk. Okay, see how it's starting to come together here a little bit? Beautiful. Okay. Next up, add a bit more milk if necessary to make it soft. I think it's pretty good. I don't think I need any more milk. Roll or pat into 1 inch thick. I'm going to take a little bit of flour and flour my surface here. I'm going to dump this onto the surface. I don't want to handle the dough too much. I know it says that you can pat it, but you don't want to melt that butter or else it won't be flaky. So I'm going to use a rolling pin. This is the rolling pin I'm using. It's a French rolling pin. I'm going to just put some flour on it and go like this. Flour will make it so that it doesn't stick. Okay. All right. Whoops.
You know what I'm talking about, Alejandro, right? You know, it's like fudge, but a cake.
Okay. Next up, cut into circles with your biscuit cutter or a floured glass. I don't have a biscuit cutter. Unfortunately, I just don't. So I could also use a glass. I could also use a round cookie cutter. So I'm going to use this to cut out my biscuits. So I'm going to just put some flour on the outside of this, and we're going to see how well this works. 1 biscuit.
And by the way, just so you know, let me show you here.
2
One of
biscuits.
the teachers I work with, they have them in the home ec room.
3 biscuits.
YouTube. One of the teachers I work with teaches global foods, right? So you can take global foods in 10th grade.
No, we do basic foods in 10th grade.
They're talking about our classes. Miss Agnes is in the room, and so is Miss Andresic, and so is Mr. Bonsek. Alright, so I'm going to put these biscuits to the side. I'm going to continue to roll these out.
Yes, Gabriella, you know it. Okay. Anyway, that was fun. I enjoy talking with you guys about food.
That's one. That's another one. There you go. And let's see if we can get another biscuit out of this. I think it should make about 6 biscuits. For the last biscuit, you can kind of like make it DIY it if you want to. Kind of be like, yeah, that's like about the right size. So we got 6 biscuits right here. Now, I'm going to put them on the pan. So the next step is, hold up, cut into circles with a biscuit cutter or a floured glass. Did that. Arrange on a greased baking sheet. I'm going to use parchment paper. You can grease it with some buttered spray. I'm going to use some parchment paper just because I like parchment paper. I'm going to grab a scissor and cut these to be the right size.
Okay, hold on, Benjamin, don't go away, hold on. Okay.
And now I'm going to place them onto the baking sheet. I like to kind of do this little off-center
Listen, here's what I want to say to you, Benjamin. Totally take
like that. Beautiful biscuits. Now, you don't want them to be too close together. They're not really going to spread out too much. They are going to get bigger, but you don't want to have them too close because you don't want them to touch that much, and you want to have some nice air circulation on here. So you can kind of like arrange them so they're like that. I'm going to wash my hands real quick. Alright, next step. Bake in a 425 degree oven. It's 425 degrees, about 10 to 12 minutes or until risen and nicely browned. Maybe take 15 minutes. I'm going to put them in for 10 minutes and then check on them. You don't want to put them in for a longer period of time and then have them be burnt. When putting things in the oven, you always need to put on oven mitts. 2 oven mitts. I cannot tell you how important it is to put both of your oven mitts on because you don't want to get burnt. So, setting my timer. 10 minutes. See you in 10 minutes. Alright, my biscuits were in the oven for 10 minutes. I took a look at them and I decided that they needed a little bit more time because they weren't quite brown enough. So I put them in for another minute, and now I'm going to take them out because they are finished. 2 oven mitts. So I'm going to pick one up so you guys can take a nice look at it. So this is my biscuit, right? It's beautiful, browned on the top. You kind of poke the top of it, you can tell that it's done. I'm going to cut one in half. You can see it's done in the middle and it made nice flakes. So those little layers of flake were created by the butter. So we use the pastry blender to cut that butter into small pieces. We cut in the butter into the flour mixture to create those little tiny chunks of butter, which made it flaky. In the oven, that butter melted and created layers in the biscuits. That's what makes a biscuit nice and flaky. So we used a pastry blender to cut in the butter. If you don't have a pastry blender at home, you could use a fork. You can use 2 knives to cut the butter into small little pieces. Some people use their hands, however, you don't want the butter to melt too much, so be careful of using your warm hands. What method did we use when mixing this? Well, we didn't use the muffin method. We used the biscuit method to make these biscuits. You're welcome. It's pretty easy, right? The biscuit method is used to make these biscuits because we used the pastry blender to cut in. Now, this is a recipe that's easy to do at home. It's a holiday, so it's kind of nice. It's like, you know, the holidays are coming up, so you can kind of make this for maybe some family gatherings coming up. It's an easy recipe. We're using a lot of different methods, so I hope you go ahead and do this. Make sure you do your post lab.